The hammer hadn't even fallen yet, but the laughter had already begun. At prestige equine auctions, where million-dollar thoroughbreds changed hands like business cards, the sight of Cordell Thorne adjusting his frayed flannel shirt among the sea of tailored suits was nothing short of comedic. The weathered farmer clutched a crumpled envelope containing his life savings, $7,000 scraped together from selling his late father's antique tractor and borrowing against next season's corn crop. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced auctioneer Brighton Kessler, his voice dripping with theatrical flair, "we present Lot 73, Windfall's Legacy, a 3-year-old mare with questionable bloodlines and a rather challenging disposition." The horse that entered the ring was a study in contradictions. Where the previous lots had pranced with aristocratic grace, this mare moved with raw, untamed power. Her coat was a deep bay, almost black, with no flashy markings to catch the eye. But Cordell saw what others missed, the way she held her head high despite the jeers, the fire in her dark eyes that spoke of spirit rather than stubbornness, and, most importantly, the perfect conformation hidden beneath her rough exterior. Millionaire ranch owner Beaumont Stryker leaned back in his premium box seat, swirling his bourbon. "That one's got Glue Factory written all over her," he chuckled. To his companion, tech mogul Garrison Vale, "Look at those bloodlines, or lack thereof. Her sire was a ranch horse, for crying out loud." Vale adjusted his diamond-studded cufflinks and smirked. "I wouldn't pay $500 for that hay burner. Some people have more money than sense." But Cordell wasn't listening to the commentary from the wealthy spectators. He was watching the mare's movement, noting how she tracked perfectly straight, how her shoulders moved with fluid power, and how her eyes never stopped scanning. Alert, intelligent, calculating. This wasn't a broken horse. This was a diamond in the rough that everyone was too blind to see. "Bidding opens at $1,000, Kessler announced, expecting silence. Cordell's weathered hand shot up, earning another ripple of laughter. From the crowd, "We have 1,000 from the gentleman in flannel," Kessler said with barely concealed amusement. "Do I hear 1,500? Silence filled the pavilion like fog. The millionaires had dismissed the mare before she'd even entered the ring, their attention already shifting to the next lot, a flashy chestnut with papers longer than a legal contract. Going once at 1,000. Cordell held his breath, watching the mare. She had turned her head toward him, and for a moment their eyes met. In that instant he saw something that made his chest tighten with certainty. Recognition. This horse knew she was unwanted, undervalued, forgotten. Just like him. Going twice. The silence stretched. Stryker was already discussing his next acquisition with Vale, neither man giving the bay mare a second glance. Around them, other wealthy bidders chatted about upcoming polo matches and charity galas, treating the auction like a social event rather than serious business. Zold, to bidder number 247 for $1,000. As Cordell walked toward the payment booth on unsteady legs, he heard Stryker's booming voice behind him. "That farmer just threw away $1,000 on dog food. Some people never learn." The laughter that followed echoed through the pavilion, but Cordell didn't care. He had just bought something priceless that everyone else had been too foolish to see. 3 months later, the dawn mist clung to Cordell's modest farm like a protective shroud as he led the mare, whom he'd named Tempest, to the training paddock. The transformation had been gradual but remarkable. Gone was the rough, unkempt appearance that had disguised her potential at the auction. Her coat now gleamed like polished obsidian, her mane flowed like silk, and her muscles had developed into perfectly sculpted curves that spoke of power and grace. But the real change was in her eyes. The wariness had been replaced by trust, the defensive anger by eager anticipation. Tempest had found her purpose, and more importantly, she had found someone who believed in her. "Easy girl," Cordell murmured, adjusting the simple rope halter he'd fashioned himself. "Today we find out what you're really made of." His neighbor, Dalton Reeves, leaned against the fence rail, shaking his grizzled head. "Cordell, I've seen you work miracles with horses before, but this one, she's got speed I've never seen. You sure you know what you're doing?" Cordell grinned, the first genuine smile Dalton had seen from him since his wife's passing 2 years prior. Sometimes you don't know what you're capable of until someone gives you the chance to prove it. He swung onto Tempest's back with the fluid motion of someone who'd been riding since before he could properly walk. The mare stood perfectly still, then responded to the slightest pressure of his legs with a smooth transition into a trot. But it was when Cordell gave her the signal to run that magic happened. Tempest exploded forward, with a power that seemed to defy physics. Her hooves barely touched the ground as she flew around the makeshift track Cordell had created in his largest pasture. The stopwatch in Dalton's trembling hand told an impossible story, times that would make seasoned trainers weep with envy. "Sweet mother of pearl," Dalton whispered. "She's running quarter-mile splits that would make Kentucky Derby winners jealous." Meanwhile, 60 miles away in his climate-controlled stable, Beaumont Striker was having problems with his latest acquisition, a $2 million stallion named King's Ransom, who had yet to win a single race despite his impressive pedigree and astronomical price tag. The horse was beautiful, expensive, and utterly mediocre. "What do you mean he came in dead last again?" Striker barked into his phone, pacing before the stallion's gold-appointed stall. "I paid more for this horse than most people make in a lifetime." His trainer, Quinton Nash, shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, breeding and heart are two different things. This horse has the bloodlines but not the desire. Sometimes the fastest horses come from the most unexpected places." Striker's face darkened. "Don't give me that romantic nonsense about hidden gems. I buy champions, not fairy tales." But across town, tech mogul Garrison Vale was having his own equine disasters. His stable of expensive horses had burned through trainers faster than he went through smartphones, and his racing operation was hemorrhaging money like a broken dam. Back at Cordell's farm, word was beginning to spread among the local racing community. Jockeys, trainers, and horse enthusiasts made pilgrimages to the humble farm to witness what could only be described as a phenomenon. Tempest wasn't just fast, she was transcendent. She ran with a joy and power that reminded old-timers why they'd fallen in love with horses in the first place. "She's not just running," observed veteran jockey Maverick Stone after watching Tempest effortlessly break another track record. "She's dancing. This mare loves what she's doing, and it shows in every stride." Cordell nodded, his calloused hand gentle on Tempest's neck as she cooled down. "Sometimes the best things in life aren't the ones with the highest price tags. Sometimes they're the ones everyone else walks past." As autumn painted the Kentucky hills in brilliant colors, Cordell faced a decision that would change everything. Local racing officials had approached him about entering Tempest in official competitions. The mare was ready, more than ready, but the entry fees and transportation costs were beyond his modest means. That's when Dalton appeared with an envelope and a grin. "Talk to some folks in town. We're all chipping in. This mare deserves her shot, and so do you." The Bluegrass Stakes wasn't just any race. It was where legends were born and fortunes were made. As Cordell unloaded Tempest from his borrowed trailer at Churchill Downs, the contrast couldn't have been starker. While other horses arrived in custom-designed transport vehicles worth more than most houses, Tempest stepped down from a rusty cattle trailer with quiet dignity. The racing world had taken notice of the mysterious mare from nowhere, but the establishment remained skeptical. Racing journalists peppered Cordell with questions that barely concealed their condescension. "Mr. Thorne," called out reporter Hadley, Cross, her designer heels clicking on the stable pavement. "Your horse has impressive times, but this is Churchill Downs, not some country fair. Are you prepared for the level of competition here?" Cordell's weathered hands never stopped there. Gentle work as he brushed Tempest's already gleaming coat. "Miss, I reckon a horse either has heart or it doesn't. All the fancy breeding in the world can't give you that." In the adjacent stables, the atmosphere was electric with nervous energy and astronomical expectations. Beaumont Striker's new champion, Sovereign Gold, a $4 million colt with bloodlines tracing back to racing royalty, was receiving the royal treatment. A team of specialists fussed over every detail while Striker held court with racing officials and wealthy owners. "Gentlemen," Striker announced, his voice carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he paid for. Today you'll witness why breeding matters. Sovereign Gold represents the pinnacle of equine genetics, and that farm boy's mare will learn the difference between pasture racing and professional competition. Garrison Vale nodded in agreement, though his own entry, Digital Dynasty, had cost him $3.7 million and came with guarantees from Dubai's finest bloodstock agents. It's almost unfair, Vale said with a laugh. That farmer should have stayed home and saved himself the embarrassment. But veteran trainer Roosevelt Duke Washington saw something different as he watched Tempest from across the stable area. Duke had trained champions for 4 decades, and he recognized something in the mare's bearing that money couldn't buy. Complete, unshakable confidence. That little mare's got something special, Duke murmured to his assistant. Watch how she moves, how she carries herself. She doesn't know she's supposed to be intimidated. As race day dawned crisp and clear, the betting boards told the story of public opinion. Sovereign Gold was the overwhelming favorite at 2-1 odds, Digital Dynasty commanded 5-1, and Tempest languished at 50-1, essentially a throwaway bet for gamblers feeling whimsical. In the jockey's room, tension was palpable. The sport's elite riders had their picks of the expensive horses, leaving Cordell to make an unconventional choice. Instead of hiring a famous jockey, he'd selected Zuri Blackhawk, a talented Native American rider who'd been overlooked by the major stables despite her exceptional skill. You sure about this, boss? Zuri asked, adjusting her borrowed racing. Ilks, these fancy boys are going to come at us hard right from the gate. Cordell met her eyes with steady confidence. Zuri, you and Tempest are both fighters who've been underestimated your whole lives. Trust each other, trust yourselves, and let that mare show them what she's made of. The parade to post was a study in contrasts. Sovereign Gold pranced like the aristocrat he was, his jockey resplendent in gold and purple silks. Digital Dynasty moved with mechanical precision, every step calculated for maximum visual impact. But Tempest walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to gain. In the grandstand, the divide was clear. The wealthy elite clustered in their private boxes, champagne glasses raised in premature celebration. But in the general admission areas, something different was brewing. Word had spread about the mare from nowhere, and the farmer who'd seen her potential. Working folks, horse lovers, and dreamers had come to witness what might be possible. Ladies and gentlemen, the track announcer's voice boomed across Churchill Downs. They're approaching the starting gate for the Bluegrass Stakes, a race that has often served as a preview of greatness to come. As the horses loaded into the gate, Stryker raised his glass toward the finish line. Here's to the natural order of things, he toasted. May the best-bred horse win. But in that moment, as Tempest settled into her starting position with calm readiness, Cordell whispered a prayer that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with dreams being given their chance to fly. The starting bell shattered the morning air like a gunshot, and 11 thoroughbreds exploded from the gate in a thunderous symphony of hoofbeats and desperate ambition. But what happened in the first furlong defied every expert prediction and shattered every preconceived notion about bloodlines and breeding. Tempest didn't just break cleanly. She launched herself forward with such explosive power that even the television commentators fell silent for a heartbeat. While Sovereign Gold and Digital Dynasty jostled for position among the pack, the mare from nowhere had already opened up a 3-length lead, running with a fluid grace that made it look effortless. Unbelievable, track announcer Garrison Steele's voice cracked with excitement. Tempest has taken the early lead and she's pulling away. This is not what anyone expected. In the grandstand, Beaumont Stryker's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. What the hell is that mare doing? He muttered, his confident smirk replaced by the first flicker of concern. Jockey Zuri Blackhawk could feel something magical happening beneath her. Tempest wasn't just running. She was flying with a joy and power that seemed to transcend the physical world. The mare's breathing remained steady, her stride long and economical, while behind them the field of expensive champions began to struggle just to keep up. "Come on, Sovereign," Stryker was now shouting, his composure completely shattered. "Run! Damn you! But Sovereign Gold, despite his perfect breeding and million-dollar training, was already beginning to fade. The colt had been raised in luxury, pampered and protected, never forced to develop the deep reservoir of heart that only comes from adversity. Digital Dynasty fared no better. His mechanical precision no match for the raw spirit powering Tempest's. Incredible performance. At the half-mile mark, something unprecedented was happening. Not only was Tempest still in the lead, she was actually pulling further away from the field. The crowd, initially polite in their surprise, was now on their feet in growing excitement. "She needs to slow down," veteran trainer Duke Washington murmured, though his experienced eye could see that Tempest showed no signs of fatigue. No horse can maintain that pace, except maybe this one. Cordell stood at the rail, his knuckles white as he gripped the fence. He wasn't watching the other horses. His entire focus was on Tempest, reading her body language with the intimacy of someone who'd spent countless hours understanding her every mood and movement. What he saw filled him with fierce pride. His mare was just getting started. As they approached the final turn, the impossible became undeniable. Tempest had opened up a commanding 6-length lead, and she was still accelerating. The expensive champions behind her were strung out like broken pearls, their jockeys desperately asking for speed that simply wasn't there. "This is extraordinary." Steele's voice rose to a crescendo. "Tempest is running the race of a lifetime. She's making these million-dollar horses look like they're standing still." In his private box, Garrison Vale was frantically making phone calls, his face red with embarrassment and rage. "How is this possible?" he screamed into his phone. "That farmer's nag is making fools of us all." But down on the track, something beautiful was unfolding. Zuri Blackhawk wasn't even using her whip. Tempest was running purely for the joy of it. Her ears pricked forward, her nostrils flared not with exhaustion, but with exhilaration. This was what she was born to do, and every stride proclaimed her greatness to the world. The stretch run was a coronation rather than a competition. Tempest powered down the home stretch with such authority that the crowd's cheers took on an almost reverent quality. This wasn't just a horse race, it was the birth of a legend. And here comes Tempest, drawing away to win by, my goodness, by 10 lengths. Steele's voice broke with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed something special. This mare has just embarrassed some of the most expensive horses in the country." As Tempest crossed the finish line, Zuri stood high in her stirrups, her face radiant with triumph. The mare beneath her was barely breathing hard, as if she could have run the race all over again. In the winner's circle, Cordell stood with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, one hand resting on Tempest's neck. The silence from the expensive boxes was deafening. Stryker sat in stunned disbelief, his $4 million champion having finished a distant 7th. Vale was already storming out, unable to face the magnitude of his miscalculation. But in the general admission areas, pandemonium reigned. Working folks who'd bet their lunch money on the 51 long shot were celebrating like they'd won the lottery, which, in many cases, they had. Sometimes, Cordell whispered into Tempest's ear as photographers captured the moment. "The heart knows, things that money never will." The racing world had just been turned upside down, and everyone knew that this was only the beginning. 3 weeks after Tempest's stunning victory at the Bluegrass Stakes, the racing world was still reeling. What had been dismissed as a fluke by some became impossible to ignore. When subsequent investigation revealed that Tempest had not only won by 10 lengths, but had done so while setting a new track record that shattered the previous mark by nearly 2 seconds, the phone at Cordell's modest farmhouse hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters, officials, and racing enthusiasts from around the globe wanted to know more about the miracle mare. But the call that mattered most came from Sterling Beaumont, president of the Jockey Club and director of the most prestigious race in American horse racing. "Mr. Thorne," Beaumont's cultured voice carried a respect that hadn't been there before. "I'm calling to formally invite Tempest to compete in the Kentucky Derby. After her performance at Churchill Downs, she's earned her place in the field." Cordell sat heavily in his kitchen chair, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders like a blanket. The Kentucky Derby, the run for the roses, the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. It was everything he'd dreamed of as a boy watching, races on his father's old television, and everything that had seemed impossibly beyond reach just months ago. "I appreciate the invitation, Mr. Beaumont," Cordell replied, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Tempest and I would be honored to accept." But even as excitement built around Tempest's Derby invitation, the racing establishment was mobilizing. Beaumont Stryker, his pride still stinging from Sovereign Gold's humiliation, had assembled what he called his dream team. 3 of the most expensive horses in the world, each costing more than $5 million and trained by legendary handlers who charged astronomical fees. "This time will be different," Stryker declared at a press conference in his palatial stable. "I've brought in Thunder's Majesty from Dubai, Storm King from Ireland, and Lightning's Promise from Australia. These aren't just American horses, they're the finest bloodstock money can buy from around the world." Garrison Vale, equally determined to restore his reputation, had purchased the European champion Midnight Emperor for $8 million, a horse that had never lost a race and came with guarantees from the most prestigious bloodstock agents in the world. That farmer got lucky. "Once," Vale told reporters, his smile as cold as winter steel. "Lightning doesn't strike twice, especially not in the Kentucky Derby." But Cordell wasn't paying attention to the posturing and predictions. He was focused entirely on Tempest, who seemed to grow stronger and more confident with each passing day. The mare had attracted the attention of Sage Winters, a legendary trainer who had developed more Derby winners than anyone alive. "Cordell," Sage said, watching Tempest move with that distinctive flowing grace, "I've been in this business for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like her. But the Derby is different. It's not just about speed, it's about heart, courage, and the ability to dig deep when everything is on the line." "What are you saying?" Cordell asked, though he could see the concern in the older man's eyes. "I'm saying that horse has something special, but she's about to face the finest competition in the world. Horses that cost more than most people's. Houses trained by people who've forgotten more about racing than most folks ever learn." Sage paused, studying Tempest's perfect conformation. "But you know what? I think she might just be special enough to pull it off." As Derby Day approached, the media narrative became increasingly dramatic. The Millionaires' Revenge Tour versus the Miracle Mare from Nowhere. International champions against the farm girl who shouldn't stand a chance. It was David versus Goliath, but with much higher stakes and a much larger audience. Training sessions became spectacles as racing fans flocked to catch glimpses of the competing horses. Thunder's Majesty moved with imperial arrogance. Storm King possessed raw power that seemed barely contained, and Midnight Emperor carried himself with the confidence of undefeated perfection. But it was Tempest who drew the largest crowds. There was something about watching her train that transcended mere athleticism. She ran with pure joy, as if every stride was a celebration of what was possible when talent met opportunity. "She's not just fast," observed longtime Derby fan Celeste Monroe, who had attended every race for 30 years. "She's inspirational. Watching her run makes you believe in dreams again." The betting odds reflected the establishment's expectations. Thunder's Majesty opened as the overwhelming favorite at even money, with Storm King and Midnight Emperor close behind. Tempest, despite her Bluegrass Stakes victory, remained a relative long shot at 8-1. But in the barns at Churchill Downs, something interesting was happening. Veteran jockeys, trainers, and stable hands who had seen everything the sport had to offer were quietly expressing a different opinion. "I've watched that mare work," whispered Hall of Fame jockey Dakota Reese to a small group of colleagues. "She's got something you can't buy, breed, or train. She's got magic." As the sun set on the eve of the Kentucky Derby, Cordell stood in Tempest's stall, his hand resting on her neck. Tomorrow would determine whether dreams could triumph over dollars, whether heart could overcome pedigree, and whether a poor farmer's faith in an unwanted mare could rewrite the rules of an ancient game. "Ready for this, girl?" he whispered, Tempest turned her head toward him, her dark eyes reflecting a confidence that seemed to come from some deep, unshakable place. She was ready to show the world what happens when potential finally gets its chance to shine. Derby Day dawned with the kind of crystalline clarity that seemed designed for moments that would be remembered forever. Churchill Downs buzzed with an electricity that could be felt in the Kentucky air itself. 150,000 spectators had gathered to witness the 149th running of the Kentucky Derby, and the anticipation was palpable. In the paddock, the contrast between the competitors was stark and telling. Thunder's Majesty, surrounded by an entourage of international handlers, pranced with aristocratic bearing, while photographers captured every angle of his million-dollar perfection. Storm King and Midnight Emperor commanded similar attention, their connections radiating the confidence that comes with unlimited resources and proven pedigrees. But the largest crowd had gathered around Tempest's simple setup. Cordell stood beside, his mare wearing his best clothes, a clean pair of jeans, polished boots, and the same flannel shirt he'd worn to the auction, now pressed and presentable. Tempest herself looked magnificent, her coat gleaming like polished obsidian, her eyes alert and calm. "She looks ready," observed Hall of Fame trainer Morrison Blackwell, who had come specifically to see the mare who'd been making waves throughout the racing world. Sometimes the best prepared horse isn't the one with the biggest budget. It's the one with the deepest bond with their connections. Beaumont Stryker made his way through the crowd, resplendent in a custom-tailored suit that cost more than most people's cars. He stopped in front of Cordell, his smile sharp as a blade. "Thorne," he said, extending a manicured hand, "I wanted to wish you luck today. You'll need it." His eyes traveled over Tempest with dismissive assessment. "Thunder's Majesty has never lost a race, you know. Neither has Midnight Emperor. Sometimes miracles are just temporary." Cordell shook the offered hand, his grip firm and honest. "Mr. Stryker, I've learned that sometimes the biggest miracles come in packages that fancy folks don't recognize. We'll see who's temporary today." As the horses made their way to the track for the traditional post-parade, the crowd's energy reached fever pitch. The wealthy elite in their private boxes raised their champagne glasses, confident in their expensive champions. But something different was happening in the grandstand and infield. Regular folks who had scraped together money to attend were wearing makeshift Team Tempest shirts and chanting her name. "This is unprecedented," noted longtime Derby observer Hadley Cross, her earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity. "I've never seen the crowd rally behind an underdog like this. It's as if Tempest represents something larger than just horse racing." In the jockey's room, Zuri Blackhawk was experiencing her own moment of truth. The sport's elite riders had their pick of the expensive favorites, leaving her once again as the overlooked choice. But as she pulled on her simple blue and white silks, Cordell's farm colors, she felt no doubt, only determination. "You ready for this?" asked veteran jockey Phoenix Morrison, who was riding Storm King. Zuri's smile was serene. "I'm riding the best horse in the field. The question is whether everyone else is ready for what's about to happen." The loading of the starting gate was a masterclass in contrasting approaches. The expensive champions required careful handling, multiple assistants, and considerable coaxing. But Tempest walked into her gate position with the calm confidence of someone heading home. "Ladies and gentlemen," track announcer Garrison Steele's voice boomed across Churchill Downs, "they're at the post for the 149th running of the Kentucky Derby." In that moment before the bell, time seemed suspended. In the grandstand, Cordell stood with his neighbors from home, Dalton Reeves, veterinarian Dr. Sage Winters, and dozens of others who had believed in the dream from the beginning. In the expensive boxes, millionaires gripped their champagne glasses and held their breath. The bell exploded across Kentucky, and 20 horses burst from the gate in the most competitive Derby field in decades. But as the thunderous herd swept, around the first turn something remarkable was happening. Tempest was not just keeping pace with the world's most expensive horses, she was beginning to separate herself from them. Unbelievable. Steele's voice cracked with excitement. Tempest has taken the early lead, and she's actually pulling away from Thunder's Majesty and Midnight Emperor. Beaumont Striker's champagne glass slipped from his nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor of his private box. "This can't be happening again," he whispered, his face pale as parchment. But it was happening, and it was glorious. Tempest moved with that distinctive flowing power that had captivated everyone who'd seen her run, while behind her, the field of international champions began to string out like broken beads. Thunder's Majesty, for all his perfection, was already showing signs of strain. Storm King's raw power was no match for Tempest's effortless efficiency. As they approached the final turn, the impossible became undeniable. Tempest was not only winning, she was dominating. The mare who had been purchased for $1,000 was making the world's most expensive horses look ordinary. "She's opening up daylight," Steele shouted, his voice nearly hoarse with emotion. "Tempest is pulling away from the field in the Kentucky Derby." The stretch drive became a celebration rather than a competition. Tempest powered down the home stretch with such authority that the crowd's roar took on an almost spiritual quality. Zuri sat perfectly still on her back, allowing the mare to showcase the greatness that had been waiting to be unleashed. "Here comes Tempest." Steele's voice broke with emotion. "She's going to win the Kentucky Derby by, my goodness, by 8 lengths. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed the impossible." As Tempest crossed the finish line, Churchill, Downs erupted in scenes of pure joy. In the winner's circle, Cordell stood with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, one hand resting on Tempest's neck as a blanket of roses was draped across her withers. "Sometimes," Cordell whispered into the mare's ear as photographers captured the moment, "the best things in life aren't the ones with the highest price tags. Sometimes they're the ones everyone else is too proud to see." Beaumont Striker sat, stunned silence, his million-dollar champions having finished far back in the pack. Garrison Vale had already left, unable to face the magnitude of his miscalculation. But in the winner's circle, surrounded by the people who had believed in the dream from the beginning, Cordell realized that the greatest victory wasn't the roses or the recognition. It was proving that sometimes, just sometimes, faith and heart could triumph over money and pedigree. Tempest stood quietly in the winner's circle, her dark eyes reflecting the same calm confidence she'd shown that first day. At the auction, she had always known what she was capable of. She had simply been waiting for someone to give her the chance to prove it. The mare who had been unwanted, underestimated, and overlooked had just won the most prestigious race in American horse racing. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone, watching, that the most valuable things in life are often the ones that money cannot buy.